Hi everyone, I hope you guys are having a good week so far. I have been trying to get this video out all week, but it has been busy and I decided to take a mental health day yesterday and just kind of shut everything out and off as much as I could. It definitely helped a lot. If you haven't done that, I definitely recommend it. I feel like it's put a lot of things in perspective. But let's get to it. So, in case you haven't noticed, we are reopening. And we could talk about numbers day and night about whether this is the right time. But honestly, it's kind of a moot point, right? Because it's happening, whether it's the right time or not. And we know that doctors and epidemiologists and certain scientists have one view, perhaps economists and financial analysts, business owners have another. Policymakers tend to fall right in the middle. And I think all of us can see the risks as well as the benefits of remaining sheltered in place. I don't personally think that we are ready, but again, my opinion doesn't matter here because what's happening is what's happening, and what we need to focus on is how can we do this correctly. Other countries who didn't reopen or didn't get it right the first time saw a surge in numbers and had to lock back down. I don't see Kern County or California or even the US even being able to wrap their minds around doing this again. So again, our focus should be on getting it right the first time. And I know that opening up leaves a lot of you more anxious than when we were even sheltering in place. But honestly, I think our officials saw that communities around the country were literally about to blow a gasket. And they had to mediate the damage being done by protests and social unrest versus reopening the workplace. So guys, when we open, numbers, hospitalizations, deaths, they will increase. We know that. It's somewhat inevitable. Try not to beat yourself over the head watching the numbers every single day. It's simply not going to help you, and I don't think it's going to help your personal well-being. What I hope is that we can respect one another enough to curtail the rise in cases and hospitalizations and death. And the good news is that our actions can directly impact this phase, just like it did the first phase when social distancing helped to flatten our curve. All of those models that everybody said were incorrect, well, epidemiological models are designed for this type of circumstance. They were supposed to be the worst case scenario. And we were so far from that. And that's a good thing because that many people didn't die. We accomplished our goal, and we can accomplish our goal again, but we need to continue to work together. So what's going to help? Masks. We need to wear masks in public. First of all, for those of you that are very anti-mask, I want you to know that it's just a mask. Let's not overthink this. Yes, it looks ugly, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, and I get it. I'm in one several hours a day, and I do feel weird if I wear it when I go out in public. But guess what? This isn't about me. It's about all of us. It's about simple human kindness, consideration, and compassion. So let's put it this way. Suppose you have a neighbor who hasn't been feeling well or is sick, and they call you and they say, would you mind picking some food up for me? I think all of us would probably drop what we were doing if we got a request like that, and we would go find food for our neighbor. And perhaps just before you dropped it off, she said, you know, my doctor told me that I'm kind of at risk for a lot of different illnesses right now. I've got some masks by my front door. Would you mind putting one on when you dropped off my food to my kitchen? And maybe you'd think, kind of don't want to, but none of us would object because this poor woman is sick. Sick enough where she asked you to go get her food, and sick enough to where she's asking you to wear a mask. So you'd put it on, you'd put the food there for her, you'd leave her house, you'd take your mask off, and that's it. You'd probably feel pretty good because you went out and you helped someone, and she's going to be really appreciative of that. And at the end of the day, it was just a mask for a few minutes. So some people are saying that the masks are a violation of their rights. And they're saying that they're not scared of this virus, and they're not weak, and they're not in the high-risk category. So why should I wear this mask? But let's remember a few things here, folks. The sacrifices of America's forefathers, who actually gave us those rights, they put their lives on the line, and they died. That's a lot more uncomfortable than wearing a mask. And because of what they did, We have rights. We were given those rights. Most of us did not earn those rights. We were born here and we were given those rights. What about the sacrifices of our past and our current armed forces and our vets who have basically dedicated their lives to protecting and maintaining our rights as well as our safety on U.S. soil? They've had loss of life, disability, PTSD, joblessness. Again, it's not asking too much to wear a mask to protect them who are now in the high-risk category because they are older. How is wearing a mask any different than wearing pants? You know, we cover our genitals when we're out in public because nobody wants to see all that when they're grocery shopping. Why can we not keep our germs to ourselves? Honestly, these are simple questions that I'm asking because I think that a lot of people are honestly making too big of a deal about it. It's just a mask. And you and I may not be in a high-risk category. That's understood. But why on earth should we then expose our germs to the essential worker who's selling us stamps or groceries or hardware? You know, most of us are not so pompous that we want to go outright and hurt another person. So we need to make those who don't want to wear a mask understand that hurting those essential workers are essentially hurting the businesses that we're trying so hard to get up and running again. And guys, we don't need to wear our masks in our own home. We don't need to wear them in our car. If you're able to go out for a walk, you don't need to wear it as long as you can stay 6 feet away from one another. I do see people wearing masks on walks, and that's okay. I think it makes them feel comfortable. But in terms of diminishing spread of this virus as a whole, if you're going out on a walk and you can spread apart from one another, it's okay to take it off. But do wear your mask when you're in the grocery store, the drugstore, the hardware store, when you're picking up takeout, when you are dropping your kids to and from daycare, so we can protect those around us. That's the overall goal here. Nobody's trying to take away anybody's rights. We're just trying to take care of one another. Next, social distancing continued and staying 6 feet apart. Just because the economy is reopening does not mean that this pandemic is over yet. It's far from over. We've got a long time in front of us, but we can continue to maintain if we can keep some distance between one another, particularly in public places. If you are able to, don't take your kids out right now to those stores, the grocery stores, drugstores, hardware stores. Try to keep them home during that time. I know that's not feasible for all family situations, but if you're able to, please do so. But remember, take your kids out on walks. Let them enjoy the spring weather because we all know it's going to be even 20 degrees hotter than today when it's scheduled to be 97 pretty soon. Let them play, let them use their energy, let them explore and look at bugs, let them look at the sky and the trees. Just keep distance from one another. That's all we need to do. I also wanted to address this concept of quarantining because I know that people are starting to tire as we move into month number 2 of this. And essentially the concept of quarantining is that many people or families have chosen a small group to associate with, visit, and stay in close contact with. Perhaps they're not wearing masks with one another, perhaps they're not staying 6 feet apart, they're having dinner together, so on and so forth. Normal, previously, family and friend activities. Obviously, in the strictest sense of the situation, this would be a hard no. But I realize, and I think you realize, that people are getting lonely and they're struggling with the psychosocial aspect of things, just like our kids are. It requires an honest and upfront discussion amongst the group, which I think should be about 2 families, of what everyone is doing in terms of their social distancing efforts, what's acceptable to the entire group and what's not. How would the group feel if someone in that group got sick? Would we start blaming each other? Would we support one another? These are questions to ask within your quarantine. It's not ideal, but none of this is. And I think that this concept of a quarantine may be helpful for those of us who are really going to be in it in the long haul. But again, we need to keep it small and we need to have those discussions up front. They're not easy discussions, but they're better to be had now when everyone's healthy as opposed to later down the road. So let's talk about a few other aspects of life. What about daycare? So obviously, as workplaces start to open, daycares are going to have to open if they haven't already to take care of those kids whose parents are going to work. It's tricky. We know that the infection rate in kids I should say the symptomatic infection rate in kids is very low. They don't seem to have a problem with the acute illness. But of course, now we're starting to learn a little bit more about complications potentially of this illness, which I will talk about in this video. It really does seem that daycares are trying to go above and beyond to help ensure safety, just like some of our restaurants have. And so I think that if you don't have a choice, you have to go to work, and your child obviously has to be cared for, then utilize the daycares. If you find something that you think your daycare could do better, or that you've heard a different daycare is doing, that will help to decrease the spread amongst the kids or to the daycare workers, share your thoughts. We're all new to this, and all of us have to be open to learning and adjusting. That's how we're going to get it right the first time. Now, if you have an option to keep your kids at home and you don't have to go to the workplace because you can continue to work from home, then absolutely please do that. Please protect our kids. Please protect even the daycare workers, because less exposure is ultimately less exposure. What about kids' sports? Well, it's hard to say what's going to happen, and I know that kids need their sports. Both of my kids have been super active in sports since they were young, and it's so much more than just their physical activity that they get from it. It's their outside time, it's their time away from their parents, it's time with their friends, it's time that they challenge themselves both mentally and physically. So I see the importance of it. And yes, it's an exposure risk. And again, we have to talk about these new complications that are popping up. So people may hold off on that further than we thought even a week ago. But my gut feeling is that if we are able to reopen safely and our numbers trend well, and we don't see an uptake in this pediatric syndrome that I'll talk about, then maybe kids' sports will open when school starts again or just before. But again, we really don't know. I think we have to see how these next 2 months of reopening the economy goes and what happens to our numbers before we start talking about our kids in school. So what about the gym? Okay, I miss my gym. If you guys know me, I belong to too many gyms, quite honestly, and I do love to exercise. But I worry a little bit about the gyms because you can't wear a mask when you exercise, right? You need to be able to oxygenate well through your mouth and your nose. And I don't think it's safe to ask all of the gym goers to wear a mask while they're exercising hard. But at the same time, that 6 feet rule becomes somewhat obsolete, because you're kind of heaving when you're really exercising hard. You're breathing out, you're breathing in harder than you normally do on a regular basis. And that means we're spreading our germs and potentially this virus. In addition, gyms are enclosed spaces. It's different than when you're able to exercise outside and you have this big, huge world for your respiratory droplets to kind of spread out through. And we're utilizing the same air conditioning. You know, the air is being somewhat recycled. And I worry about the risks with gyms. I really do. But at the same time, the restaurants have gone above and beyond to ensure safety. Daycares are going above and beyond to ensure safety. So let's see what the gyms do. I personally don't think we're ready yet, but I know that they are vital to our community and to our health. So we just have to take it one step at a time, but we shouldn't rush into these things, guys. We really shouldn't. Okay, so next I want to talk to you a little bit about all this pediatric information that's coming out recently. There is a new syndrome called pediatric inflammatory multisystem syndrome, and there have been cases in the UK, in New York, and I believe even close to us at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. These kids all come with fever. Half of them, about, in these small cases that we've seen, have had abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, and rash. Others might have red eyes, almost like pink eye, but without all the goopy discharge. They may have a very red tongue. Their lips may look very red and cracked. Their fingers might be swollen, and they look sick. This is not just your kiddo who has a fever, but you give him some Tylenol and he feels better and they're running around. They really look sick. And the problem with this illness is that it can affect major organs like their heart, causing dangerous drops in blood pressure, or their lungs, causing them to need a ventilator. Fortunately, from all of the cases that we've heard about thus far across the globe, there have been no deaths. Some of these kids have a positive COVID-19 swab. Some of them have positive antibodies. So what we don't know is this a direct complication of COVID-19? There's so much to be learned, but we need to start paying attention because these cases are definitely popping up since this pandemic started. The condition, it is similar to another inflammatory syndrome that you may have heard about called Kawasaki's disease. And interestingly, Kawasaki's happens 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes months after a routine illness, like a cold, which we know can be caused by the coronaviruses that are not quite as aggressive as COVID-19. That type of Kawasaki's disease is treated with something that we call IVIG. And this is actually a mixture of antibodies that they get from blood and plasma donations. And that helps the complications of Kawasaki's disease. So will it be such that as more and more people are exposed to COVID-19, that we can use IVIG that has COVID-19 antibodies to help with this syndrome? We don't know, but it certainly makes sense based on what we're seeing. It's just so early in the game to say anything one way or the other. And I know that when kids get involved, we all start to panic. And I will tell you, please don't. Just let the information come. And again, I know the information is discombobulated and all over, and the headlines scream, children are getting sick, and we panic. But this is not the time to panic. Let us investigate. Let us figure a little bit more out, and we'll come to you with that information. So last but not least, this is something that has been on my heart a bit. Do you remember when all of this first started and there was a conspiracy theory that was saying that the virus was being transmitted through 5G? Well, I will tell you that I don't think that the virus is coming through our phones, but I do think that our phones are causing another epidemic of its own, an infodemic, if you will. Our screen time is up across the nation, myself included, like to a ridiculous and almost embarrassing amount. And I think it's taking our toll. So many Americans are not at work. We're not being stimulated. We're not busy. And on the flip side, we're stressed, we're anxious, we're fearful, we're overwhelmed, we're tired, and we're arguing with one another. And this has impacted our ability to think rationally. And quite honestly, guys, I think we need to all stop reading so many articles and watching all the videos, and we need to look up. We need to look at the sky that actually doesn't have so much pollution in it right now. We need to look at the trees and appreciate how green they are. We need to look at the people in our house and talk to them and remember that we're going to get through this and go back to rational thinking. We need to pull back a little bit. We need to disconnect, myself included, even though I'm making these videos for you, and we need to start thinking rationally and critically again. 2 weeks ago, it was all about how this virus isn't dangerous. Maybe it's just the flu. Let's open the economy. Now, all of a sudden, it's a lethal man-made virus that's designed to control all of us. Folks, whatever it is, it's time to let go of all of that and just move forward, okay? I know that some of you are scared about this concept of a vaccine, but guess what? We don't even have a vaccine yet. We're speculating about what the government is going to inject into us when we have so many more issues that we need to deal with right now. So why not be part of the solution, like wearing a mask and decreasing spread, than being part of the problem and raising more fear about something that literally doesn't exist yet to the common public? In regards to vaccines, I'm sorry, I have to say it because I just can't let it go. I am a firm believer in vaccines, and I always will be. If you think Big Pharma is all over vaccines and is benefiting from vaccines, think of it this way. If Big Pharma wanted to make a lot of money, wouldn't they want us to be sick? I mean, why would they create a vaccine for like $15 a pop when we could all get sick and spend at least 10 grand a night staying in the hospital? It just doesn't make sense. And pediatricians are the ones who give out the most vaccines. And if you haven't noticed, we're not exactly the ones driving the Bugattis around, right? We're just your average folk. I am just like most of you. And next, I see vaccines as a privilege. And you may not, and that's okay. But I would encourage you to talk to someone in their 70s about measles or smallpox or polio, and ask them what life was like when these epidemics were happening when they were kids, just for kicks. Stop doing the research and literally just talk to someone. Or talk to a parent whose baby has had whooping cough in the last 10 years. Or talk to someone who's had cancer or chemotherapy or a bone marrow transplant and ask them what they think about the need for other people getting vaccines because they can't. To me, vaccines are a product of modern medicine, and it's what makes our average lifespan in America 78.5 years compared to 50 years in the Central African Republic. That's a difference of 28.5 years. And I think vaccines have played an important role in that. Do they have risks? Of course they do. But so does Tylenol and Motrin and driving a car. Do the risks outweigh the benefits? Every time. Is social media really good at scaring the heck out of you when it comes to vaccines? You bet they are. But if you're someone who's had a complication of a vaccine, and I take care of some of those kids who have had complications, you're in the group that actually needs the rest of us to get them. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that it didn't work for you. And that's true of anything out there, right? Tylenol, Motrin, antibiotics, they work for most, but some people can't tolerate them. And I will say that if and when a vaccine is ever safely made available, my family and I will be the first to get it. First and foremost, because I don't want to spread this virus. I want to be able to protect my community, and I want to be part of the solution. Less importantly, because I want to get on with my life. I want to move past this virus, and I want to get back to exploring all that this beautiful planet has to offer, but I can't do that right now. So that's it, guys. I know this was a long one. I thank you for sticking with it. And just as I said, take some time to disconnect. Take some time to look up, to look outside, and find some peace in all of this. And I think we will all be better off because of it. All right. Have a great day, guys.